Okay, we are live. Hello, everybody. I am here with Academy student Lola, and we're going to be talking about her relationship, marriage, right? I think you're married, if I
I'm married,
remember.
yes.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about your marriage. We're going to talk about how the work that you have done in the Academy program has really shifted how your man is showing up, and also talk about what happens when you're not applying the stuff in the Academy, how the difference is there. So
Yeah.
before we dive into the Academy stuff, where we'll talk about the Academy stuff, we'll talk about what your love life is like now. First, tell me a bit about what were the really big problems that you were experiencing prior to joining the Academy with us.
So I would say I was feeling very, very disconnected from my man in my marriage. I was generally feeling very anxious almost all the time. I mean, I've had times when he's looked at me and said, "Do you need to wee?" And it's just me feeling anxious. It was quite extreme. I would, my circulation was affected in my legs as well. So feeling pins and needles is quite extreme. So I'd reached a stage where my anxiety was no longer just sort of emotional, but it was almost becoming something that I was experiencing quite physically as well. And
And sorry,
I was generally feeling, yes,
tell me what you said the feelings were that were causing that physical manifestation. I'd missed that.
anxiety. I was
Anxiety.
feeling
Okay.
anxiety.
Lots of
Yes,
anxiety. Okay. Tell me
yes.
why so there is a disconnection, there is anxiety. Tell me specifically what was bringing up that anxiety for you. What were you afraid of? What was happening? What were the stories that you were telling yourself?
Well, I'd gone from being somebody who's working full time. I was busy. I was always around people to becoming a stay at home mom. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the time, it was just me and baby. And in that kind of scenario, I didn't know what to do or how to be. And and my marriage became sort of a central focus. And I don't know, I think I'd had some sort of performance anxiety and just trying to figure out how to be a wife. And I really didn't know what to do or how to be.
Okay. And tell me what you did try to do? So like you didn't really know how to be a wife. How did you show up?
Oh, I was quite controlling. I was trying to be. I mean, I remember my mum once saying to me that I was trying to be a man like him in our marriage, and I wasn't quite as good as being a man as he was, so it wasn't working. So yeah, those kinds of things. I struggled with the idea of stepping back and giving up financial control and sort of putting my husband and the kids first. And yeah, that was very, very challenging for me at the
Okay.
time.
Okay, so you did a call with me, and I still remember it. And you
I did, yes.
joined the academy, which was fantastic. And then tell me, what was your experience like? What when you first joined? What did you start realizing?
Well, I started realizing that I was experiencing the world through my emotions, and I was dealing with my emotions through trying to change my circumstances and change the behavior of people around me to sort of deal with my emotions. If I'm feeling angry about an experience, I'm thinking, what are they doing and how can I get them to change the behavior so that I'm feeling less angry and happier.
Yes. And tell me, so you mentioned that you were very controlling. So when you would try to change your man when you're feeling anger or anxiety, would it tend to be more overt, like you're kind of telling him what to do, judging him, or would it be more covert where you're
I was telling him what to do. I was
telling him?
judging him. I was blaming him.
Oh,
Yes. I was leading him. Yes. I
yes.
was doing all
Okay.
those things.
Okay.
Yes.
Tell me how he responded typically when you would do that.
there were times that he would literally leave. There were times where he'd give in, and then in a few months he'd revert back to his old sort of way of being.
Yes.
So we'd have big agreements about childcare. So I, wanted him to commit a certain number of hours or days to looking after the kids.
Yes.
And he'd agree to it, and then we'd have an argument, and that'd be the end of that. So, yes, that kind of thing kept happening.
Yeah, and it's an important thing for women to realize when a man ends up submitting to a woman, whether it's because she's telling him what to do, or whether it's just because she's judging, or even if it's just she's got expectations and standards in her head. When a man submits to that, when he follows that, it's going to be very difficult for it to be sustainable. And why is that? It's because men are not instinctually wired to follow a woman's lead in any way. So he can do it out of obligation, or he can do it out of fear. He can do it out of people pleasing. My guess, based on what you're telling me about your man, was probably just more obligation. But it's going to tend to not be sustainable. And at some point, he's just going to say, don't really want to do this anymore. And certainly having an argument ahead of time, that's going to definitely out of that too. So the only way for a man to shift his behaviors in a sustainable way is when he's inspired to do it. When a woman is actually making the shifts necessary where it feels good for a man to shift his behavior. It actually feels effortless, feels fun, because he's doing it to take care of his woman and he enjoys that. So you joined the academy, started having some realizations. Tell me, was there anything really difficult, really challenging that you encountered in the academy? Anything that was really, really difficult for you to shift?
I guess the idea that a man's in charge of the finances, a man's a leader, and he ought to be allowed to lead. I had this tendency of spending quite a lot of time thinking about my problems and only discussing them after I've decided on how to solve the problem. And I think you taught me that it's a man's job to lead to a solution. So that was particularly difficult.
Okay. So tell me, tell me what okay, so there's the difficulty. I'm assuming that's fear-based. Tell me if that's correct. Like you're afraid of letting go of that control. Yeah. Okay. Tell me what the fear was there. So if you were to let go of control, what is the bad thing or bad things that you believe might happen?
I don't know. I think I don't know. I guess I had this fear that if I didn't handle, if there was some sort of decision that was made and I didn't like the way it turned out and I didn't handle it well, and there was a risk that I could be abandoned. I think that's something that I feared.
Yes. Big fear. That fear of abandonment, right? And that is, that's the number one thing underneath everything else for a woman, that letting go of control, letting go of all those fear patterns. There is typically that fear that if you do that, for one reason or another, you will be abandoned. And then you will not be receiving that provision. And ultimately, in many ways, that feels like a death sentence. And so it's very hard to let go of that control. But you have been doing it. You have been increasingly letting go of that control. So tell me what is shifting and what has shifted so far in your marriage. How are things different than before you joined us?
So I think when I had my first, I remember having my meeting with you, and you you talked to me about sharing my feelings more.
Yep.
You asked me to think of examples of how my husband has responded when I simply shared my experience instead of trying to tell him what to do. And so I think I've done more of that. I have done more of that. So when I'm experiencing challenging emotions, I focus on being responsible. So I'm really thinking, focusing more on my feeling about the experience instead of focusing on how I think they ought to behave or how
Yeah.
he's meant to behave. Um, and sometimes I don't, and sometimes he'll change his behavior just by my focus on my feelings,
Yeah.
and just by sharing what I'm experiencing, um, with my emotions, based on how he's behaving.
Yeah.
And I find that he's a lot more responsive. A lot of the time when I've come up with a solution, I find that bless you, I find that he resists it. But then if I just talk about the anxiety I'm feeling or the sadness, or if I say I'm missing you, or he he comes up with he solves the problem. He really does. And I think, plus, I find that my experience is more pleasant. So I feel calmer, more settled, and more joyful if I say I feel sad than if I go on about how he's wrong for the way he's behaved. Um, yeah, so it's been, yeah.
Yeah. So a
Think,
couple of things
yeah,
there. One important
yeah.
one for all the ladies watching is get out of any kind of trying to provide solutions for a man, right? Giving him
Mm-hmm.
the solution, whether it's, really harsh, like telling him what to do or nagging, or whether it's really soft with, nice little suggestions and nudges and hints. Because when you do that, you're leading, right? You're giving him the solution already, and you're taking away that opportunity for him to solve your problems and come up with a solution. And that's what a man needs to do to feel good about actually doing the solution, is that it's his solution, it's not yours. If he's submitting to that solution, he's never going to feel good. And another thing about this, right, there is, even if a man, women need and want many things. And of course, whatever your solutions are, you want those solutions. But what a woman wants, even more than the solution, is she needs to feel in her body that feeling that a man is cherishing her. He's taking care of her, that he's doing it of his own complete free will. He's doing it because he wants to do it. He really wants to do it. And the only way that a man's ever going to really have that intention, that desire, is when he's fully leading, right? So even if a woman gets what she wants when she provides her solutions, she's never getting what she needs, which is a man's cherishing. You spoke to one other really important thing, Lola, which is about, and this was a bit earlier, with feeling your feelings and
Mm-hmm.
being able to just be with your feelings when you're feeling some discomfort, whether it's anxiety or sadness or anger or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to control the environment, which of course usually involves controlling your man to make the bad
Mm-hmm.
feelings go away. Tell me about how that started shifting for you, because that's a really important shift. You can't be feminine as a woman if you're stuck trying to control anything in your environment to make the bad feelings go away. So tell me what your experience was.
Um,
Just like learning how to feel, learning how to be in your body, learning how to accept your feelings, all that stuff.
uh, my husband has generally been resistant to being controlled, And I felt that has pushed me to finding some sort of alternative way to be in this marriage. And so I kept reminding myself of the times that you showed me, you pointed, you made clear to me I guess you asked me to notice the impact of just focusing on my feelings, to notice the impact that has on my relationship and my interaction with my husband. And I decided to start doing that more. And the interesting thing is sometimes, because I used to, before I discovered your work, I'd come across this idea of reaching for a better feeling thought, which I struggle to do when I'm dealing with challenging emotions. I'm often stuck with this judgment that I can't let go of. So it's normally difficult to reach for better feeling thoughts. But then when I started focusing on my feelings, I found that sometimes it just helps me break out of this solid judgment. And then my mind starts providing me with sort of alternatives. So, well, maybe they're not trying to be horrible, or maybe they're trying to reach a solution, one that works for both parties. I think that the more I did that, the more that I became less controlled by blame and judgment as a way of
Yes.
dealing with my feelings. So just focusing on the feeling, and then the judgment and the blame softens.
Absolutely. Clarify for
Yeah.
me for a sec. So when you're talking about, you're doing the thinking stuff, you're judging, and you're trying to solve that before the academy. Tell me, are you saying that you would try like positive thinking stuff, like you try to shift the thoughts, or is it something else?
Yes.
Yeah, that was what it was. Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Yes. I was an affirmations queen. I would come up with all kinds of affirmations. I did. I was doing that and doing anything to get away from the challenging emotions.
Yes. Yeah, so this is really interesting too, right? So I'm not saying that there's no value in doing affirmations, but they are problematic for a lot of reasons, or at least not nearly as effective as they could be for a lot of reasons. And one of them is what you're really doing with these affirmations. First, it's much more superficial level, right? It's the thoughts rather than what's happening in the body, where all the much more important stuff is happening. But two, it is another form of control, right? You are trying to control your thoughts. You're trying to shift your thoughts, make yourself different in some kind of way. And that doesn't really heal a woman. That doesn't actually help you shift the deeper pattern, which is always focused on control. You can't shift control by being controlling and controlling your mind. What a woman has to do is she has to get into her body and start accepting, start feeling, start allowing everything that's inside of her. And eventually the thoughts just start shifting on their own, and it becomes significantly easier. So that's really good. So tell me, so give me a bit more of an overview now. So you've made all these really great shifts. Tell me how your man is now showing up differently for you. How is your relationship better practically?
We just get along a lot better. Like, everything's just we're just getting along a lot better. I'm feeling happier.
Okay.
And I'm far less inclined to change his behavior, which he's always been very resistant to. And I'm a lot more likely now to share my feelings, and I have to be honest with you, a lot of the time my feelings just come out of me. So
In a good way
they
or in a
really
bad,
do.
like a vulnerable way
Well,
or in a,
I was
yeah.
never a feelings girl, you see. I was one of those women who would feel something, blame someone, decide how they ought to change, and then tell them about it.
Uh-huh.
So the last thing they hear about was the way I was feeling. I first tell them how they ought to be different. And now I just talk about myself instead of them. And I find that I'm a lot more receptive to people's love and support because, before I met you, I used to ask myself, why does nobody have compassion on me? Like, you know, I'd feel like I was having a really, really hard life and I could talk to somebody about it. And all they'd see was strength and they'd say, oh, you'll be fine or you're okay. And I thought, oh my God, and I'm totally, completely torn inside, but I always come across as this incredibly strong person. And I think that with you, I've learned to show people that what I'm feeling with, which I was almost incapable of doing. And the more I show people how I'm feeling, the more they show up for me. And I feel a lot more supported. I feel a lot more love. I feel a lot more, letting go. I'm no longer that girl who can't stand having a full bin in the kitchen and I have to do it myself. Honestly, I don't know how I do it now, but I can. I can just respect that he cares about me and he will deliver. And I was incapable of doing that
Fantastic.
before,
Really great to
before I
hear.
joined the academy.
Awesome. Anything else that you would like to share about your experience, the shifts that I haven't directly asked you, that's on your heart?
No, I'd like to thank you, to be honest. I think that I spent a lot of time trying to understand what it means to respect a husband. I grew up in the church and there's a lot about, husbands loving their wives and wives respecting their husband. And I didn't know what it meant. So I love that now I'm not always doing what I want to do, but at least I know, and I spend quite a lot of time learning from you. And the more I do, the more naturally it's coming to me and things are coming together.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. They make it a lot more complicated the way that it's explained than it needs to be, right? If you can actually break it down into simple shifts, behavior shifts, intention shifts, communication shifts, it's actually much easier to create what is essentially biblical, right? It's what the church does teach. And there's a lot of religious minded people that really do need this work because there's a lot of unhappy marriages, whether people are religious or not. So yeah, you're very welcome for everything, and it's been really great having you with us and also having you on this call. So thank you very much as well. For anybody who is interested in learning about making these communication, behavior shifts, self-worth shifts, all the stuff that we teach, the best way to start is to join our Relationship of Your Dreams Masterclass, where we will teach you all about masculine and feminine communication, what it looks like, how to start communicating differently, and then we will role play it for you so you can actually see it, so you can actually feel it, which is totally different than just reading my books or just hearing about it on Facebook. So if you haven't been to one yet, join it for the, I think we have one in 2 days. So go to polaritymasterclass.com, book your spot, and I will see you there. And it will open up an entirely new world for you. And you'll realize so much about what you need to do to make these shifts, to whether you're in a relationship, whether you're single. It's going to really help you get the kind of love, get the kind of cherishing that you deserve as a woman, or the kind of respect that you deserve as a man, for any men watching. All right. Thank you very much, Lola, for coming on with me. And thank you, everybody else who tuned in. And we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you.